What's up, everyone? Welcome and welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Komaris, and as you can see by the title, today I'm going to be talking about the documentary Sly Lives, aka The Burden of Black Genius. And in this documentary, well, before I get into the documentary, I want to get into how I found out about Sly. So I don't know if I talked about this before on the channel, but if you're new here, I do collect vinyl and pretty much CDs too, but specifically for this situation, I'm going to talk about my vinyl collection. I didn't really start getting into vinyl until I was passed down a few records from my great uncle, which was given to me by my grandma. He had passed away like way before I was even thought of. My mom was still a child, and he had a collection of vinyl left over, and my grandma just so happened to still like have some, and she was like, do you want it? And I pretty much got it, and since then I started like adding on to it. I ended up blind buying Fresh, which was the last studio album that they had with the group's like original lineup. I didn't know that when I bought it. I just looked at the cover of it and I blind bought it because I thought the cover was cool, and I've known of Sly through like pictures, but as of like by name and music, I did not know him. But I'm kind of starting to, well, since getting into vinyl, I started like doing this thing where I blind buy records just because it's like, to me, it's like that's how I believe that people used to discover music in the past. Like back then we didn't have Spotify to recommend us songs and things like that and albums, so I'm pretty sure that's what they used to do back in the days. But nowadays people like shun upon it and be like, you shouldn't buy things or invest into things unless you know a lot about them or a lot about the artist. And I can be one of those people when it comes to certain things, but when it comes to that, like buying vinyl or records in general, I totally disagree. But yeah, back into the video. This documentary is directed by Questlove, a 6-time Grammy-winning American drummer, music producer, author, and now a rising film and documentarian producer. This documentary can be found on Hulu and also found on Disney Plus. And my main takeaway and message after listening and watching the documentary is that pioneers don't always receive the fruits of their labor, and sometimes their job is to make it easier for those that come after them, rather if they are credited or not. And now I'm just going to get into like some notes that I just took while watching. This documentary was very interesting. Also, coming from a person who hasn't really like gotten into Sly's music yet, but to just know his story before getting into his music is definitely going to reshape the way that I experience, it's going to reshape my listening experience, basically. But yeah, let's get into these notes. First note I have is that Sly became multidimensional to make a name for himself. And this is because the documentary talks about how he produced all types of music for all types of people in multiple genres and for multiple bands and artists of different racial backgrounds and ethnicities. And it just goes forward to the constant saying that's been around for generations, is that black people have to go 10 times as harder and they have to be 10 times as good. So like, for him to be able to do things on his own and even start his own band, he had to show that he can work well with other people and help other people do things. So I'm pretty sure him working with other groups and stuff like that helped him build and maintain connections with other artists and helped him get like studio time and stuff like that from studio owners and producers and things like that. Yeah, He also played guitar, bass, drums, and sang in church. In the documentary, they talk about how his parents, both of his parents, were very active in church. I don't remember exactly what they both did, but I know one of them did sing in choir, and he also sung in choir too. So, almost every artist that has like the background of being in church choir, they always tend to be like very good artists and singers. And I just have never like really heard of that from a person like Sly, who is really considered a black rock star. I never known many of them to like grow up in church. And maybe that's just me and my ignorance, but yeah, that's my truth. And he actively fought against being seen as a black artist, even though his group was one of the first to be racially integrated. And his group is Sly and the Family Stone. It wasn't just an all-black group like most black artists in bands were. They pretty much was just subjected to an all-black group because in those times, which was the 70s, 60s, they didn't really want to see that happening. Again, like this was one of the first racially integrated bands, and they talk about how Sly and his ability to like work with groups was very great because he wasn't very much a dictator. He would pretty much like just give them the skeleton of the song and let them loose and help them get comfortable with adding elements of themselves to the song. So like if he'll be like, if he picks up on you not singing to your fullest, or you're not plucking the guitar as hard as you usually do, he's gonna point that out and make sure that you do that better and you be you. Just like, which takes me back to like Whitney Houston, when she didn't really like for people that sang with her to limit themselves and take away from their moment, because I believe it was Kelly Price that was singing with her as a background vocalist, and I don't know who told Kelly Price that she was trying too hard or she was out singing Whitney and this and that, but she listened to them and she started to give less effort in her singing. And Whitney Houston told her, when she picked up on her like not going as hard as she usually does at practices, she was like, what's wrong with you today? And she told them like, they told me to calm down, this and that. And she was like, oh no, like, do you, be you.
I can remember being on the set of the Rosie O'Donnell show, and we were singing Heartbreak Hotel, and we were in sound check. In between takes, I'd been approached from a staff member from Arista Records who told me that it was disrespectful of me to, on Whitney's stage, try to outdo her. And so when we ran the song again, I scaled it all the way down, and literally in the middle of the song,
Whitney stopped and said, "What's going on?"
"Kelly, what's wrong with you?" And I whispered in her ear, I said, well, somebody told me that I was doing too much and I kind of needed to pull back, and I just don't want to be... Who told you you're doing too much? I said, I want to know who told you. Who told her? And Jeff told her. She told that individual from Arista Records that they were to leave, that they weren't welcome there, that she didn't appreciate them disrespecting me in that manner, that I was her guest. But not only was I her guest, but I was an artist and I deserved to be treated with the same level of respect that she was treated with. She was like, B, don't you ever.
And that's something that like a lot of artists don't really like do. The main and the leads, they want to be the main and the leads, and they want all the shine to be on them. But not knowing that if you allow the people that are around you to shine their light as well, you all can shine together, and in a way this still doesn't take away from you and the light that is displaced upon you. And yeah, I think that's really dope of him, and it says a lot about his character, and that he wasn't a very selfish, rock star artist. And yeah, basically he gave them the skeleton of the song, basically like letting them know like what it is that he had imagined or came up with, and he helped them do whatever they could to help bring that to life, bring his idea to life, and make sure that they do it at their very best. They became like a very successful group. They started to like perform many places, many of the major places, even Madison Square Garden and stuff like that, which is like the ideal place to play and sell out. Yeah, there was a very big group, and also like one of the first like racially integrated multi-race bands to become like very successful and win so many awards and things like that. But things start to get political with this band. They create an album titled There's a Riot Going On. And this album was basically like a response and answer to Marvin Gaye's What's Going On album, which the album was like talking about like war and, you know, Vietnam War and poverty and environmental pollution and degradation. There's basically like a lot going on in the world at that time, and you know, even just being black at the time was like still haunting, even in the midst of all the political issues that were going on in the 70s. And you know, yeah, they started talking about politics, and you know, a lot of people start to stray away, well, artists today stray away from politics because of the way that bands and artists in the past were treated when they spoke up and were very like opinionated about their, well, not opinionated, they just became very vocal about their positioning and standing when it came to certain situations that happen in the world, especially pertaining to the government. And you know, this made it like very hard for like, you know, people who didn't agree with the things that they would sing about and say towards. So like they were no longer like really getting radio play. They were no longer getting all the big shows that they used to get and attention and stuff like that. So to a lot of people, meaning like radio stations as well, they kind of would like try not to pick their side, or try not to seem as if they are agreeing with what has been said, or you know, your opinion that you have vocalized. And that has made it harder for them to like live up to the success that they have already acclaimed, and you know, grow from there. And it pretty much caused them to go down like a downward spiral. Yeah. And the cover of the album, There's a Riot Going On, the use of it is an American flag, and it doesn't really look like the traditional, you know, red, white, and blue American flag. It's American flag, but you know, it's not that American flag. And to me, I find it interesting when they go into detail about like how a lot of black artists, black bands, and black people in music, they use the black flag, well, not the black flag, they use the American flag a lot, even though like what America and the government and a lot of people who are very patriotic with the flag, their opinions and views do not align with what works in favor of black people. So to use the American flag as a black person can be deemed as very controversial. And if you know anything about Cowboy Carter going on right now, you can pretty much see how much talk back and discourse was started when Beyonce revealed herself with the American flag for the Cowboy Carter cover. People, including me, didn't realize that the way that we use the American flag is bold, and it's also an act of reclaiming what our ancestors has fought for. And I used to be one of those people to be like, oh, I don't care about the American flag. You would never see me wearing the American flag. You would never see me standing for the sad, I don't even know, the national anthem. Wow. And things like that, because it's not true. And I even have like this project that I did when I was in 7th grade where I talked about like, why can't we be what the flag means? Granted, I didn't even know like at the time like what the flag really even meant, but I knew that the government itself, and based off like all the things that I had started learning about Black history and how much our ancestors and our elders have been through, it just makes it, at an early age, it made me very upset and angry, and to the point to where I didn't want to seem like I sided in any ways with the government or their views, because they don't really care about us, honestly. And you know I did begin to learn about Fannie Lou Hamer too at the time, where she talks about like basically standing in honor of the flag and things like that because of what our ancestors have fought for, because they helped build this land. They helped build everything going on right now, even the things that have been going wrong. And it's not their fault that they're going wrong and outside of our favor, but they help build these things by force. And it'll be very disrespectful for us to not honor them with the flag.
The flag is drenched with our blood, because you see, so many of our ancestors was killed because we have never accepted slavery. We had to live on it, but we've never wanted it. So we know that this flag is drenched with our blood. And people ought to understand that. I don't see why they don't understand that. They know what they've done to us. All across this country, they know what they've done to us.
And we can agree and disagree about that in ways I still like really feel weird and don't see myself like wearing the flag proudly, but I do find it cool when artists tap into the Americana, Black Americana, if you will, by including the flags into their work, which Andre 3000 is the one who speaks on this part of the documentary. And with their Stankonia album cover, they have the American flag and it's black and white and things like that instead of the traditional red, white, and blue. To me, that flag, like seeing it itself, the black and white flag, it makes me think of everything being black and white, meaning that we're going to not glorify and personify everything else to be this magical fantasy land with all these different colors and things like that. We're just going to keep everything black and white, meaning we're going to go straight to the point. We're not going to sugarcoat anything. We're just going to say it like it is. And yeah, back to the Sly Stone situation. So when they started to get political, the Black Panthers wanted them to become one of them. And not only did they want them to become one of them, they wanted them to donate. And Sly was like, we don't have to do that. Why would we donate? And he also didn't see himself as an activist or a black nationalist in a way. So he didn't really agree with a lot of, the things that Black Panthers stood for and their, I suppose, their ways of going about things, but he just felt like that wasn't some, they couldn't prove to him why him donating to them would be beneficial to them and him and the black society. So he didn't, and he didn't force himself to become a Black Panther. And again, speaking on politics made not only the group less relevant, but it made him very less relevant, because he was pretty much the face of the group. The group's band is literally Sly and the Family Stone. So yeah, again, that's one of the reasons why a lot of public figures and artists and anyone just in the public eye, public figures, they don't like to talk about serious topics and very opinionated topics, because it takes away a lot of opportunities and it takes away a lot of shine on you. So now I'm going to talk about how Sly became a pioneer. He pretty much started the wave of psychedelic funk and genre-bending experimentation that led to inspiring many artists to come after him. And later in the documentary, you will see people like Prince, Michael Jackson, many of the artists that have come after him, and started to gain traction after he started to decline in relevancy. And he also influenced like other groups to become multiracial and multi-ethnic, racially integrated, and things like that, and forced them to like do more things, like create records that take you into a place and be like world building, instead of just producing music just to sound good, which you could really get a lot of that in the 80s. Yeah, when they first started, like, it wasn't the norm for a group to be racially integrated, and they was getting a lot of side eyes because of that at first. But as time passed by and they saw like the greatness that was coming out of the mixed race and cultures, they started to want to see more of that, and not only by Sly and the Family Stone, but the many other groups that came after them. And and not by 1975, the band had pretty much broken up and were no longer active after having a very, very, very bad performance. They pretty much, and a lot of people in the band were not paid for the performance. So they pretty much at that point just had given up and let go of the band. And Sly was still doing stuff independently, trying to make things happen, and also still working with people who weren't part of the original lineup of the band. But he pretty much just tried to keep going in the midst of that transition. And even though he still pushed forward and kept trying, it really didn't help, because he was still declining in relevancy. And this pushed him to doing all types of random things that a lot of people at the time thought he was crazy for doing, and in a way saw him as like a minstrel and making a mockery of himself. He would host like award shows, and he would appear on talk shows, and he also like tried recreating like so many moments of his career and things like that, but it just wouldn't work out. And one really like crazy thing that he did do was he held a concert and wedding at the same time at the Madison Square Garden. This helped him like sell tickets, because this was also a wedding, so people did want to see him married. And there did have pretty much fans who was still looking for them and things like that. So they saw this as an opportunity, so of course they were going to pay for it. But for someone to have a concert and a wedding at the same time is unheard of and very like innovative. So that event itself just being sounding interesting, I'm pretty sure people who weren't even like fans of the artist or didn't even know who he was just paid to go to the concert just to see like what it was about. And yeah, that was really dope. But even all of that couldn't really like bring him back to the heights of his career as it once was. And he tried recreating moments of his career and basically like forcing optimism in his music, even though that he was already in a very dark place. And it just became even harder to, fake like he wasn't internally damaged or emotionally disrupted. So in the midst of all of that, he became addicted to drugs. And he was going in and out. Oh my God. He was going in and out of jail back to back to back. Several times throughout the same year and back to back throughout a few years. And he ended up going to rehab and he got himself together. He got himself clean eventually. But he would come out and, still be back on the same things like, getting on drugs. But he did eventually get clean. And when he finally got himself together, he wanted to push forward even more. Like, he didn't give up. He still wanted to make himself more relevant again, because this is not, doing music was not like his choice. This is the only thing like he has the capacity to want to do. And that's what makes it like really hard as a creative person and I suppose a black genius. Sometimes like there's so other many things that you could be doing, but there's only one thing that your heart truly is fixated on. And in a way, life can make it harder for you to make that your reality. So even though like he pushed for it, he kept putting effort into this thing, music, it wasn't working in his favor. But he couldn't really find anything else that gave him the same pleasure. Even while doing all these random things just to like keep himself relevant, just so he could go back and do music eventually. But it wasn't working for him. And that's really one of the biggest burdens of being like a black genius, I guess, and just being a creative. And he also didn't really, it appears that he didn't really understand the music business. So he thought that mass producing music would bring him more income, but he didn't own the publishing or the rights to his music. And he didn't really know that his music was being like taken and being synced to other like films and commercials and stuff like that. He wasn't aware of all of that, and he wasn't getting a dime from it. So yeah, a lot of his songs, even in records, were being sold or the rights to them were taken away. Yeah. But also, one thing that did work in his favor was sampling, and this came from, the birth of hip hop. And in hip hop, it was born in 1973. Some may argue that before that, but we're gonna go with what they say, on record. 1973 is when hip hop was born and made an actual genre. I believe it was actually made an official genre by 1976. But yeah, they would take music from the crates, which is why I said that I like to blind buy music, because in early hip hop they would pretty much blind grab and buy vinyl and records and just take off of them samples and things that they found cool and just repurpose them in very unique ways. And that was happening a lot with Sly Stone in his songs. One of the most famous songs that is pretty much a hip hop staple, Mama Said Knock You Out by LL Cool J, samples Sly Stone. And there are many other hip hop staples that sample Sly Stone. And in a way, this helped like bring relevancy to him again, and he wasn't even aware of it because he wasn't like tapped into that culture. And by the time he also like reached, by the time like things started, like hip hop started to like flourish even more, like he was already like to the point to where he was tired of trying, he was tired of innovating, and tired of humiliating and feeling like he's being ridiculed. He took a step back and pretty much became a recluse, and we no longer really saw him in the public eye as much as we would have liked to. Sly and the Family Stone Band was inducted into the 1993 Hall of Fame, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, in 1993. Even the band members thought he wasn't going to show up to the event and be there to accept the award. Like, they was on stage talking about him in the same time when he surprised them by showing up on stage and saying thank you to everyone, and you know, he will be back, they will be back.
As usual, it's just us.
There he is. You showed up.
Oh, it's this guy here.
But it was all actually a lie. After that, he ended up going back even more into being a recluse. And you know, it just takes us back to the title of this documentary, Sly Lives. A lot of people, even me, wasn't even really sure that he was alive, because you don't really see him anymore like how you see a lot of the artists and bands that are, you know, still alive, that reigned at the same time as Sly and the Family Stone Band. This documentary basically showed us that he is still alive, and the only con to all of this and all of his contributions to music and the culture of music and even fashion, it doesn't seem like he received the fruits of his labor. In one of his last interviews, which they play at the end, he talks about like how he doesn't feel burdened by being a black genius. He pretty much just feels like we all get the life that we deserve. So we don't get any current or new talkings from him and appearances from him on this documentary. So I would just have to assume that maybe he felt, as he said before, he felt like he deserved the life that he's been given. But I would really love to know like how he feels about the life he's been given truly. Not just that, does he feel like he deserves it? But one like very honest and true quote D'Angelo said in the documentary is that white rock stars and artists get to go out in style. And he compares that to like in the movie The Godfather, which I have not watched, don't kill me. Basically The Godfather died in the tomato garden with family surrounding him. He was saying like a lot of white artists get to die with millions and the big house and all the money and all of that, all the shine, the fame, and the highlights. But black artists don't. And even while watching like the documentary, when they started to talk about like his addiction and things like that, it seemed as though like well, I can't say it seemed, but I can only assume that they being like media, white media specifically, they only like really highlighted and showcased him, or tried to make efforts to highlight and showcase him more when he was in a decline. But when he was making efforts to try to become better and try to gain more relevancy before becoming addicted to drugs, they didn't really honor him. They didn't really highlight him. And that's something that they're definitely going to do when he eventually does pass. Like, they're going to try to, highlight him, this and that. They're going to make sure that they be the first to publicize that he has passed away. And it's very sad because it takes black artists to die or to go through something very traumatic just to be highlighted again and to have like their art showcased and loved and appreciated. And it's very sad, and in a way makes you feel like you did all that work just to die. And yeah, it's not right. But as the documentary says, that's the burden of being a black genius. And yeah, I really love this documentary. I'm definitely going to tap into more of Questlove documentary. I remember watching one. I don't know if he had parts in this, but I believe it was about Woodstock. I believe he had something to do with that. I don't know, but in school we watched a lot of documentaries, and he would be like one of the speakers, the common speaker in almost all of them. And yeah, very dope documentary, and I can't wait to work on something like this too, because I do see myself as a documentarian. And yeah, but after this I'm going to be getting more into Sly. I've already been on eBay looking at old 70s magazines and things like that, even though they look like newspapers, so that's also really dope. But yeah, I've been looking into getting into his discography and learning more about his story and things like that. And prior to watching this, I believe I watched some clips of Sly actually talking today, like in his later years. I believe these are deleted scenes. These could be deleted scenes, or this could be for a totally different documentary. And he's very wise, and he's still, mentally there. And he's talking about his innovation and how he believes, he did what he was supposed to do, and he's living the life that he was supposed to. And just basically talking about how cool of a life he's lived and things like that. It was on YouTube, but I don't know if this is tied to the same documentary. But I did see a lot of people talking about how they didn't like that Sly wasn't on this documentary, and how they feel like he's being used, this and that, which I'm pretty sure his family wouldn't allow that. They're literally in the documentary. But yeah, maybe he didn't want to talk. Again, he's in his recluse bag. And it's sad that so many black artists give so much in their early lives, and they reach an older age, and sometimes it doesn't take reaching older age. It takes just a matter of years of giving and not receiving like the love back or your efforts being truly like appreciated, it makes them like take a step back into, you know, not feeling the need to do what they love anymore because of all the bad that has and harm that has been placed upon them because of it. And yeah, thank y'all for watching. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And you know, I'm gonna continue to talk about like documentaries, film, and everything like that. I have a whole playlist for it, so check that out as well. But yeah, thank y'all for watching, and I'm out.